Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ryan Matzinger. I am the professor of jazz here and saxophone at MSU. And I grew up in Bozeman, left for quite a few years, got the opportunity to tour and make records with some of the musical legends. And I've been here back in Bozeman about 12 years now. And just thank you for sharing this time today and lending your ear and your open mind to maybe a different perspective on something that we all cope with and deal with on a daily basis. As a professor, I always and often try to remind my students that I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here rather to open windows that may provide alternative perspectives on what you may have thought or felt something was before, but in truth, it's actually something different. And I work in American Studies and Jazz in research methodologies that are less conventional, to look towards the less visible, sometimes hidden or left out voices and turning points that allow us deeper thought and a clearer path to mining truths. And so I think let's take a little bit of a musical journey and then we'll visit some more. Let's go back to 1772 and a very famous song that was written by a former slave owner who had an epiphany and a change in his life when he realized the ills of slave and the catastrophic legacy that it was leaving and creating in our very country at that time. And he wrote this song called Amazing Grace. And I think we'll go there in 1772 and then jump almost 100 years forward in the heart of slavery and when blues start to percolate up and then evolve into jazz. So now we're situated in the blues. And this all began for me really as an exploration when I was in college studying at Duke University and the Hart Conservatory of Music and wondering why there were these missing links and why there were these entire chunks of our history that had been summarily erased and were never addressed, especially by my Black professors. They would talk about these things and the ides of racism and these horrible, unresolved contradictions of American ideology, but they would address it from experience. My professor at Duke talking about what it felt like to be on the Chitlin circuit in the 40s and 50s with his revolver in one pocket and his stash of whiskey in his other, with big B.B. King and Big Maybell and the blues greats. But they would never further address what this kind of Americanized Western pedagogical approach that we've all gone through, which is this overly politicized canon that doesn't address the ephemera and the voices and us as a people, and the notion of why we're still coping with and dealing with all of these unresolved contradictions of ideology. Why still genderism? Why sexism? Why classism? Why racism? And I took it upon myself to then start researching further and looking into these things, and it led me down this path where we are now, standing here today together, in which I can say to you in full 100% scientific assurity that there is no such thing as race as we've been taught and beholden to feel our whole lives. It doesn't exist. It only exists in as much as we allow it to. It's a social, cultural construct that is the legacy of the catastrophic era of slavery that we all are a part of. In a society, in a culture, in which the highest benchmark of all is science, that's our proof point. There is no science that addresses this thing. And in the sense, think of it if we invited a phlebotomist in here today and blindfolded them and drew blood. There's markers and things that of course show chromosomes, blood types, maybe tributes and attributes that might lead them to think one thing or other, but we all know now, if we think about it this way with an incremental shift in perspective and sensibility, that there's nothing in our blood, mine or yours, that marks or denotes or is biologically classifiable as black or white. It's just a social construct. And so then my work became, how do we dismantle these things and undo them? The further I delved into this jazz world and the jazz narrative that touches so much of America. And where did it begin, and why is there this missing link? That to me, I think, was what was going to provide all of these answers, and in turn it did. But most of us, myself included, went to music class, went to history class, and boom, it's 1920, and it's the Harlem Renaissance, and it's the heyday, and we're going into the swing era, which becomes the most popular music of all time. What happened before that? Where did this come from? Where did we come from? What is us being us? And so let's start by defining culture. Culture is the arts and other manifestations of human and intellectual achievement regarded collectively, or the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. So what I began then was this pathway to a comprehensive study of American culture and the construction of race through the musical idiom of coon songs. It's an examination of the jazz narrative and the role of blackface minstrelsy and coon songs as they directly relate to the jazz tradition and the construction of race in 19th century America. So then my work was in a methodology that blends the excavation of less standard resources and research techniques that approach American history from further outside the chronological strictures and modes of conventional historical inquiry. The American Studies jazz scholar musician / American citizen human is compelled to live by, creatively inquire about, and more thoughtfully comprehend the rationally intuitive values of jazz music and cultural literacy. In this study of race construction, coon songs and the American jazz narrative, as regarded from a revised conventional modality of jazz as American studies and American studies as jazz, what's really on the line is the way that American culture cultivates and yet also demolishes social and racial hierarchies through musical idioms. So let's establish ourselves on a timeline. And I work with my students in the same way. Well, what is jazz? Is it this free-form, improvised, right? It's a big question. And so we get a working academic and musical definition, which is this uniquely indigenous American art form, which is a dance-based derivative of the blues. That situates us. And let's situate ourselves on the timeline. Again, we started in 1772. We're over 100 years into the North American slave trade. We then jump to 1834, which sees us at the eminent beginning, the first iteration of American culture. Blackface minstrelsy, in which you would have Southern whites painting themselves black and then portraying and depicting what was the stereotypical or suggested notion of what it was to be black. And then this spread and became huge, bigger than we could even think, comparable to how hip hop sells today. This was in parlors, it was in homes, it was on stages. It became the most popular form of American entertainment. And then by 1890, we enter into the coon song craze, where it becomes even more popular and as well established now as not just American culture, but as an accepted portrayal of white society and black society. And these two things clashing together. And by the end of 1890, into 1900, we enter into ragtime and stride piano. And then 1903, we get into New Orleans jazz or Dixieland. And then thereof, we have these incredible, influential, legendary artists like Buddy Bolden, who leads us to King Oliver on the trumpet, who leads us to Louis Armstrong. And then we get the swing era into bebop in 1945, at the end of the World War II era, into post-bop and fusion and funk and soul, and then rock and roll, and then hip-hop. Without jazz, we have no hip-hop. Without jazz, we have no rock and roll. Without jazz, we have no American culture. But as a black scholar and a student, then it was so hard for me to understand these things, and it's all of our sensibility, more often than not, to flatten these things down into, oh, what a horrible, vitriolic, ugly thing, and let's just shelf that and not put it away. But that's academically dismissive. That's not mining the deeper truth. That's not researching what was really going on and what was really happening that puts us here today in 2022, going into 2023, still grappling with these same conventions and notions and having this ideology of racism in America that controls so much of our lives. But as we've already discussed, and now you know, and you can go research and look on your own, it doesn't really exist even. It's only a social, cultural construct. Jazz is the study of America. When researching the origins and the story of our storytelling music and the chronicle of us being us, it's too narrow a path to focus only on the romanticized notions of the various and contested narratives on jazz music and its culture, while continually disregarding the social and ideological context of the times. The resolution and evolution of the American idea of race as only cultural construct is the work of today and beyond, and has always been the work of the jazz music tradition. So understanding its roots in the troubling convention of the coon song allows the jazz scholar, musician, historian, and American alike to understand and perceive a different, more holistic view of American musical culture and the human experience. Understanding and unpacking this American culture through the examination of the coon song craze from social, musical, historical, and cultural points of view is essential to all of us, and to finally, in the year, hopefully 2023, quelling this and dismantling it. To comprehensively unpack race as musical idiom and the ideology behind coon song, and then the notion of American music as a forum for reversing racist ideology, it becomes of utmost importance to perceive coon songs as a mechanism for justifying segregation and subordination in America, while at the same time being a provider of agency, platform, and reversal, and proxy for social and cultural change. I could never figure out why you had Black musicians donning blackface themselves and very famous Black composers that were composing these pieces and doing this music. I didn't know that until I thought about it. Well, what was the alternative? Be a musician, make a whole bunch of money, evolve, have a place in society, or continue to be a slave? Then it started to make sense. The intriguing argument behind the study of coon song, minstrelsy, and jazz then as a platform and forum for examining and then understanding the construction of racial ideology in America rests on how to understand the degree to which these idioms empowered the impoverished, Blacks and whites, and the middle class alike. That's where, if we mine this historically, we start to see the white working class directly in formation with the new Black, now considered human class coming together. There's a catalyst here that happened. And so, in conclusion, think of these things differently. Open your mind. Maybe don't ask yourself to change it, but open your mind to have a shift in perspective that allows us to have the sensibility that there is way so much more alike that we share than anything that makes us different in any way. And it's all connected to this beautiful root of jazz music and the narrative, which had this most ignoble, vitriolic, hateful beginnings, but then evolved to dismantle and undo these notions and be a stalwart denier of these unresolved contradictions. So we're still constructing race through culture in America, and it's still driven by and manifested in music. From the Euro-American tradition of blackface minstrelsy evolves the coon song. And as we've discussed, from coon songs we reap ragtime. And then we get jazz, funk, and now hip hop. Uniquely American. There is no such thing but race. It only exists as the cultural construction that we allow it to be. And through musicology and a musical recovery of our own history and mining less traveled conventions of research, we get to this place of a better understanding of ourselves and a place where we can progress, begin again, move forward. And think about this again, not as race as we've been taught and told, but instead of what it is and what we need to be. This is about the human race. That's very real. And so let's take it out today as they would in New Orleans back in the early 1900s with a little When the Saints Go Marching In, and think about these things differently. I implore you, I beg you, I urge you. It will change everything, finally. Thank you.